Hello and welcome to Grace Tutorial. In this video lecture, we will be discussing the entire things about the Constitution of India and its features. Here, most of the points are picked from one of the most relevant books for the civil services examination, that is Indian Polity, written by M. Laxmikant. Well, let me commence the session beginning with the definition of the Constitution. So what is the Constitution basically referred to? Well, the Constitution is a fundamental law of the country which reflects the fundamental principles on which the government of the country is based. Let me make the definition very simple for you about the Constitution. The Constitution is basically a laws or the principles that a nation or a state or an organization is governed by. With the exception of Israel, New Zealand and United Kingdom, almost all the countries possess an elaborate written constitution. Similarly, the India also possesses an elaborate written constitution, and we will talk about the features of the Indian constitution, which is slightly later. But before that, we need to understand that how the Constitution of India was made. That's why we need to consider about the making of the Indian Constitution. Well, in the year 1934, that the idea of the Constituent Assembly was put forward for the first time by M.N. Roy. So who was M.N. Roy? M.N. Roy was the pioneer of the communist movement in India. That means in 1934, the idea of the Constituent Assembly was put forward for the first time by M.N. Roy. Again in 1935, the Indian National Congress, INC, officially demanded the Constituent Assembly to frame the Indian Constitution. Later on, in 1938, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru In 1938, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru declared that the Constitution of the Free India must be framed without the outside interference by the Constituent Assembly, and that is also on the basis of the universal adult franchise. Later, what happened? The demand was finally accepted by the British government, which is what now known the August Offer of 1940. Well, in the year 1942, Sir Stafford, a member of the cabinet. So who was Sir Stafford Cripps? Sir Stafford Cripps, a member of the cabinet of the British government, he came to India with a draft proposal on making the Indian Constitution, on framing the Indian Constitution. But these proposals were rejected by the Muslim League because they wanted India to be divided into the two separate states, into two separate constituent assemblies. Finally, a cabinet mission was sent to India. While it rejected the idea of the Constituent Assembly, it put forth a scheme that less or more satisfied the Muslim League. Well, if we talk about the composition of the Constituent Assembly, the assembly comprised of, the Constituent Assembly was constituted in November 1946 under a scheme which is formulated by the Cabinet Mission Plan. So what are the features of the scheme? If you look at the first feature, the total strength of the assembly was 389. Out of this 389, the 296 seats were to be allocated to the British Indian provinces, whereas the 93 seats were to be allotted to the princely states. Out of this 296 seats which were allotted to the British Indian provinces, the 292 members were to be drawn from 11 governor provinces and the 4 from the 4 chief commissioner provinces. Feature number 1. Feature number 2. The representatives of these communities, or the 296 seats which were allocated to the British Indian provinces, were to be divided among the three principal communities. Those are Muslims, Sikhs, as well as the general. Here the general refers to all others except the Muslims as well as the Sikhs. Feature number 3. The representatives of each community were to be elected by the members of that community but the voting was to be by means of a single transferable vote. Proportional representation by means of a single transferable vote. That means the representatives of this community were to be elected by the members of those community only by voting. So what is the voting system? The voting by means of a proportional representation or by means of single transferable vote. Feature number 4. The representatives of the princely states were to be nominated by the heads of the princely states. Finally, it has become very clear that the Constituent Assembly comprised of both the partly elected body as well as the partly nominated body. That means the Assembly comprised both the elected members as well as the nominated body. Well, if you look at the 296 seats, for the 296 seats, the elections was held in between July to August in 1946. As a result, the Indian National Congress won the 208 seats and the Muslim League won the 73 seats and the other small and independent groups won the 15 seats. We need to understand here, the Constituent Assembly was not directly elected by the people on the basis of the universal adult franchise. Though it was not directly elected by the people on the basis of universal adult franchise, the Assembly comprised of a variety of the sections of the people. The Assembly comprised of the Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Parsis, Anglo-Indians, Indian Christians, SCs, STs, women, including all sections of society. That means the Assembly comprised of all such eminent personalities that time, with the exception of Mahatma Gandhi. So this is what all about the composition of the Constituent Assembly. Now we will discuss, the working of the Constituent Assembly. Well, if we look at the working of the Constituent Assembly, the first meeting of the Assembly was started on December 9, 1946. The Muslim League or the Muslim community boycotted the meeting and they insisted on a separate state of Pakistan. Thus the meeting was attended by only the 211 members. Dr. Sachidananda Sinha was the oldest member of the Constituent Assembly, was elected as the temporary president of the Assembly. Later, Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected as the president of the Assembly. Both H.C. Mukherjee and V.T. Krishnamachari were elected as the vice president of the Assembly. That means the Assembly comprised of two vice presidents, that is H.C. Mukherjee and V.T. Krishnamachari. Now we will discuss the objective resolution which is passed by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru on December 13, 1946. Well, if you look at the objective resolution on December 13, 1946, on December 13, 1946, the objective resolution was moved by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. It laid down the fundamental as well as the philosophical structure of the Indian Constitution. It read, wherein the Constituent Assembly declares its firm as well as the sovereign India Republic as an independent sovereign republic and to draw for the future governance of the Constitution. That means the Constituent Assembly declares its firm resolve to proclaim India as an independent sovereign republic and to draw for the future governance of the Constitution. Point number 2. It read, wherein the territories that now comprise of the British India, Indian states, other parts of India, outside India, the states as well as the other territories of India shall be a union of them all, shall be constituted into a republic and shall be a union of them all. And all the powers and authority of the sovereign independent India and the organs of the government are derived from the people. In that resolution it was read that all the powers and authority of the sovereign independent India and the organs of the government are derived from the people. It also read that wherein shall be guaranteed and secured to all the people the justice in social, economic, political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and the integrity of the nation. Whereby the adequate safeguards shall be provided to the people, those who come under the backward classes, those who come under the minorities, the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes. That is also one of the philosophy it was read in that resolution passed by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. It also read, wherein shall be maintained the integrity over the territory of India, on the land, on the sea, as well as the air, according to the law and justice. Finally, these resolutions which were passed by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru were adopted by the Constituent Assembly on January 22, 1947. In this way, the objective resolution was passed by Nehruji. And now, we will discuss the committees of the Constituent Assembly. Well, if you look at the committees of the Constituent Assembly appointed a number of committees in order to deal with the different tasks of the constitution making. Out of all these committees, the 8 were the major committees and the rest of the committees were the minor committees. Let me tell you, what are the 8 major committees, and these committees are chaired by whom? Well, we have the first one, that is the Union Powers Committee, which is chaired by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Similarly, we have Union Constitution Committee chaired by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru itself. We have Provincial Constitution Committee chaired by Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. And we also have the Drafting Committee, which is chaired by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. And we have the Advisory Committee on the Fundamental Rights, Tribal Issues, which is chaired by the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. And we have the Rules of the Procedure Committee, that is chaired by Dr. Rajendra Prasad, the States Committee by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, and the Steering Committee, Dr. Rajendra Prasad. In this way, the committee appointed the various number of committees to deal with the different tasks of the constitution making. And out of those committees, these 8 were the major committees, and these 8 committees were chaired by these various people. Well, here we need to discuss more about one of the most important committees of the major committees, that is the Drafting Committee. Well, the Drafting Committee, which is chaired by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, was set up on August 29, 1947. This committee played a very significant role in framing or in making the Indian Constitution. The committee comprised of the 7 members, including its chairman. If you look at the members of this committee, that is Drafting Committee, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the chairman of the committee, N. Gopalswamy Iyengar, Alladi Krishnaswamy Iyer, Dr. K. Munshi, Syed Mohammad Shadullah, N. Madhav Rao, T.T. Krishnanchari. These were such eminent members as well as the personalities who played a very significant as well as the key role in framing the Indian Constitution. After taking into consideration about these committees, the committee submitted its report. Means the first draft was published on February 1948. And the second draft was published, that is on October 1948. Then the final draft was introduced by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar itself on November 4, 1948. And the reading took place for 5 days, that till November 9, 1948. Till November 9, 1948, the reading took place and it was continued. What happened basically? This was finally adopted and this was passed by the Constituent Assembly on November 26, 1949. Initially, we had 395 articles and 8 schedules. That means the Constitution was adopted by the Constituent Assembly on November 26, 1949 and came into force on January 26, 1950. And that's the reason why we celebrate the Republic Day in our country. That means, what is the reason of celebrating the Republic Day on January 26? On November 26, 1949, the Constitution was adopted by the Constituent Assembly and finally it came into effect, it came into force on January 26, 1950. Now you need to understand that why this date was specifically chosen. Because in 1930, on January 26, on the same day, the Purna Swaraj was declared. And due to this historical importance, this day was chosen to celebrate the Republic Day, that is the Constitution Day. And we need to remember this fact as well. Initially, the Constitution had 395 articles. Now, initially it had 395 articles and 8 schedules. But if you look at the Constitution of our country right now, we have more than 444 articles, hundreds of amendments, 12 schedules and 24 parts. Well, this is all about the committees and about the drafting committee, and we need to talk about Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, a law minister who played a very significant role in drafting the Indian Constitution, is popularly known as the father of the Indian Constitution, the undisputed leader for the scheduled castes, and he is also known as the father of the modern menu. So who is the father of the Indian Constitution? Dr. B.R. Ambedkar is the father of the Indian Constitution. That is what we need to remember from all this part. And next, we will discuss about the enforcement of the Constitution along with its criticism. Well, if we look at the enforcement of the Constitution, some provisions of the Constitution containing the citizenship, elections, provincial parliament, temporary as well as the traditional provisions and the short titles contained in the various articles such as 5, Article 6, 7, 8, 9, 60, 324, 366, 367, 379, 380, 388, 391, 92, 393. And it was adapted. These provisions were adapted on November 26, 1948. And the rest of the provisions was adapted, came into effect on 26 January 1950, and this is the reason why we celebrate the Republic Day. As I have just said before 1 minute, that some provisions of the Constitution were adapted initially. Later on, some other provisions came into effect. That is on 26 January. That's why we celebrate the Republic Day. And this day was particularly chosen due to its historical importance, because on that day, the Purna Swaraj Day was declared. In 1930. And this is the fact that we need to remember from here. Now let us discuss about the criticism of the Constituent Assembly. What the critics talk about the Constituent Assembly. First one, this is not a representative body. The critics argue that the Constituent Assembly was not a representative body because the members of the Constituent Assembly were not directly elected by the people on the basis of the universal adult franchise. The critics also argued that the Constituent Assembly is not a sovereign body. That means the Constituent Assembly was created by the proposals of the British government, and the first meeting of the Constituent Assembly held by the permission of the British government. And the critics also talk about the time consuming. That means in order to frame the Indian Constitution, the Indian Constitution took unduly a long duration, that is 2 years, 11 months, 18 days to complete its work in framing the Indian Constitution, which is very much long. The critics say that the American Constitution took just 4 months to complete its work. In this context, the Naziruddin Ahmad. So who is Naziruddin Ahmad? Naziruddin Ahmad, a member of the Constituent Assembly, remarked that his contempt to it, that he stated that this is not a drafting committee, this is a drifting committee. So Naziruddin Ahmad stated, due to its long duration for the formation of the Indian Constitution, he stated the drafting committee instead of the drafting committee, he stated the drifting committee. Well, the critics also say that the Constituent Assembly was dominated by the Congress. Well, Granville Austin. So who is Granville Austin? Granville Austin is basically a constitutional expert, the British constitutional expert.